There is a cheap liquid that costs exactly $3. It completely destroys automotive rust at the molecular level. It literally cooks red rust into blackened armor plating. No expensive plasma cutters. No heavy welding equipment. No leaving your vehicle at a body shop for weeks. Just a cheap liquid, a wire brush, and a spray bottle. Collision centers charge $3,000 to cut and weld rusty frames. They tell you rust is an incurable automotive cancer. They claim the only solution is completely replacing the metal. They are lying strictly to protect their massive labor fees. This $3 liquid chemically converts active rust into impenetrable iron. It takes roughly 24 hours to cure completely. It permanently shields your vehicle from road salt and snow. It costs less than a fast food cheeseburger. Why did your dealership hide this chemical reality? Because the automotive body repair market generates $50 billion annually. A permanent chemical cure actively destroys their largest revenue stream. Vehicle frames are intentionally sent from the factory entirely unprotected. They spray a thin layer of cheap black paint underneath. They know road debris will chip that thin paint immediately. They know winter road salt will aggressively attack the bare metal. They rely entirely on this highly predictable chemical decay. The moment you see red flakes on your vehicle frame, the industry considers you a highly profitable hostage. They charge you $150 just to inspect the undercarriage damage. They charge you $3,000 to cut out the infected steel. They weld a brand new piece of incredibly cheap metal. Then they spray the exact same weak paint over it. 3 years later, the exact same new metal rusts completely. This is a mathematically perfect and highly ruthless corporate trap. A liquid that permanently stops rust cannot be easily monetized. You cannot force a customer back into the welding bay. You cannot charge 100 hours of manual labor for simple chemistry. They buried this chemical solution to protect their welding empires. Let me take you back to the massive industrial shipyards. In the early 1930s, the heavy maritime industry faced a crisis. Massive steel cargo ships were dissolving in the salty oceans. Traditional scraping and painting completely failed to stop the decay. The microscopic rust spores remained trapped deep inside the steel. Industrial chemists desperately needed a highly aggressive chemical intervention. They discovered the absolute power of pure phosphoric acid. Phosphoric acid is a naturally occurring and highly stable compound. It is mass-produced globally for industrial agriculture and food preservatives. When shipyard workers sprayed this acid onto heavily rusted hulls, the chemical reaction stunned every mechanical engineer on the docks. The acid did not just hide the red rust underneath. It violently attacked the oxygen molecules inside the rust spores. The decaying red flakes physically morphed into a black crust. The steel became entirely immune to the violent ocean saltwater. The military quickly adopted this exact chemical for heavy artillery. Underground pipeline companies used it to protect massive oil networks. The compound that protected battleships cost mere pennies per gallon. But the modern automotive body shop looked at your rusting truck. They aggressively chose the expensive plasma cutter over the cheap chemistry. They chose a massive labor invoice over your financial survival. Before we expose the exact chemical breakdown, listen closely. This rust conversion secret is just the tip of the spear. The automotive cartel is hiding hundreds of permanent mechanical fixes. The massive chemical companies are intentionally burying cheap alternative solutions. This channel is dedicated strictly to exposing every single lie. We are currently uncovering the $4 cloudy windshield restoration compound. We are releasing the absolute off grid water purification blueprint soon. Hit the subscribe button right now to secure your financial freedom. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Do not let them keep you completely dependent and financially drained. But absolutely do not close this video right now. We are about to dismantle the massive body shop cartel completely. What actually happens when your vehicle frame rusts? Mechanics tell you the metal is simply getting old. They claim the steel is naturally reaching its expiration date. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of basic physical chemistry. Rust is officially known as iron oxide. It happens when raw steel violently collides with water and oxygen. Winter road, salt aggressively accelerates this exact chemical reaction. Iron oxide acts exactly like a biological parasite on metal. It physically expands and flakes, creating microscopic, hidden craters. When you try to fix it with a basic wire wheel, you only remove the top visible layer of the red rust. Microscopic iron oxide spores remain deeply embedded inside the metal craters. If you spray expensive rubberized undercoating over those remaining spores, you trap the active oxygen and moisture directly against the steel. The rust silently continues to eat your frame from the inside. The expensive rubber coating eventually swells and peels off entirely. You return to the mechanic 3 years later for another inspection. He shakes his head and prints a $3,000 welding invoice immediately. He treats a basic chemical imbalance exactly like a structural catastrophe. How does a $3 acid permanently stop this aggressive cancer? Phosphoric acid is a brutal and uncompromising chemical converter. When you spray this specific acid onto active red rust, a violent and highly visible chemical reaction begins immediately. The acid heavily attacks the unstable iron oxide molecules. It physically strips the oxygen completely out of the rust structure. It chemically converts the dying red metal into ferric phosphate. Ferric phosphate is a completely stable, black, rock-hard mineral. It is chemically inert and physically impossible to rust again. The acid reaches deep into the microscopic craters of the steel. It hunts down and destroys every single hidden rust spore. The structural decay of your vehicle frame stops instantly. The red powdery cancer morphs into an impenetrable black armor. This is not a temporary rubber band, aid hiding the active damage. This is a permanent molecular alteration of the steel itself. The newly formed black armor acts as a perfect paint primer. You can spray basic spray paint directly over the cured metal. The moisture and salt can no longer touch the bare steel. The scientific process is officially called rust conversion. Industrial chemists have verified this specific reaction for over 80 years. Why is this acid not aggressively advertised in auto parts stores? Let us look precisely at the brutal economic reality. A collision center relies strictly on incredibly high labor rates. They charge $150 per HR just to operate a welding torch. They sell you heavily marked up replacement steel panels. They trap your vehicle in their bay for 3 straight weeks. They absolutely depend on the rust returning a few years later. A professional rust repair costs $3,000 and lasts 36 months. This phosphoric acid costs $3 and lasts forever. A branded rubberized undercoating spray costs $150 and lasts 12 months. This chemical conversion costs $3 and lasts forever. You absolutely cannot build a massive franchise on $3 chemical fixes. You cannot charge a massive labor rate for squeezing a spray bottle. If every driver in America bought a gallon of phosphoric acid, the collision repair industry would lose billions in a single winter. They survive strictly because you do not understand basic molecular chemistry. They survive because you inherently panic when you see red flakes. You are exactly funding their massive expansions and new equipment. When you alter the chemistry yourself, you become a massive threat. So how exactly do you convert your rusty frame today? Here is the strict and unforgiving protocol to armor your vehicle. Go immediately to any large hardware or home improvement store. Walk directly into the concrete masonry and paint preparation aisle. Look for a product labeled as concrete etch or metal prep. Read the back label and ensure it contains phosphoric acid. A large jug of this acidic liquid costs roughly $15. That equals roughly $3 per HEVI application on your vehicle. Purchase a basic plastic spray bottle and heavy rubber gloves. Put on tight safety glasses and a basic particulate mask. Crawl under your rusted vehicle with a stiff wire brush. You do not need to grind the metal down to bare steel. You only need to violently brush off the loose, flaking chunks. The acid strictly requires the underlying rust to function properly. Once the heavy flakes are gone, fill your plastic spray bottle. Generously spray the liquid acid directly onto the red rusted areas. Ensure the liquid completely saturates the rough and pitted metal. The metal will immediately begin to gently fizz and bubble. This is the active conversion of iron oxide to ferric phosphate. Leave the vehicle completely untouched for exactly 24 straight hours. When you return the next day, the red rust will vanish entirely. The metal will be completely coated in a rock hard black crust. You have successfully armored your frame against all future salt. Spray a cheap $5 can of black enamel paint over the crust. You just saved yourself $3,000 using a concrete driveway cleaner. This chemical conversion is much more than a simple automotive trick. This is a glaring rejection of a heavily engineered financial trap. Every time a massive industry discovers a cheap chemical cure, they deliberately bury it deep in the absolute dark. They replace it with incredibly expensive and temporary manual labor. They train their service writers to aggressively mock chemical alternatives. They rely entirely on your inherent fear of structural vehicle damage. They want you completely and utterly dependent on their welding bays. Industrial engineers built massive ships designed to last for decades. The automotive industry actively ignored that resilient chemistry on purpose. They engineered a massive financial dependency that did not need to exist. That vicious cycle of corporate extraction ends right here today. You now possess the exact chemical blueprint to armor your property. Share this critical knowledge with every single driver you know. Send this to anyone who lives in a heavy winter climate. Do not let them steal another hard-earned dollar from your family. Take back absolute control of your own vehicle maintenance. But this is only the third step in our massive investigation. There is another heavily guarded mechanical secret you need to see. A $4 compound that permanently restores heavily scratched and cloudy windshields. The massive auto glass industry prayed you never discovered this powder. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover it. Starve the massive corporate system that violently bleeds you dry. The next vault is officially open.